Marie-Helene, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
For those of you that are meeting for the first time, can you do a little introduction, maybe talk a little about yourself, what brought you to this work? And I don't know if there's like one question you're really obsessed with right now. What are you focused on?
Haha. So, background is as a work psychologist who then worked in leadership roles from very junior, middle management, senior, C suite, all this, both in public and private sectors. And now I'm a speaker, executive coach, and still have a practice as a psychologist. And what really got me to the focus I have of bringing psychology and business together was seeing how professionals and leaders were trying to, I mean, they're dealing with so many demands and trying to find something that will give them an edge and allow them to sustain the energy, the focus, the judgment, good judgment and good decision making, even ethical decision making through the speed of change that we're dealing with. And that's a question that I continue to be fascinated by, and using both research we've had for decades, but also research we have now about how AI and emerging technologies are impacting all this.
I completely understand that challenge. I know your book, The Resilience Plan, looks at a number of ways to think about it. But a lot of people, when they hear resilience, they picture grit, toughness, pushing through. But you frame it a little differently, more as a strategy, not a trait. What made you write the book in that direction?
Yes, it's the fact exactly as you describe it that for a long time this is how people were assuming resilience looked like, and in fact, it's not just us assuming this, and how wrong could we be? It's It's all around us. Even you look at a movie often, and you would see the person who's struggling with something, and on their own and through grit and persistence make it through, and that's how it looked like. And the reality is that resilience is our ability to go through all these demands, the adversity, and come out even stronger. And it is very much a systemic concept. So it's not just us as individual on our own dealing with everything. It's us, the team we're in, the organization we're in, the moment in time we're in. So there's a much bigger context, right, than just our one individual part, and also even the individual part of this entire system. When we're talking about going through adversity and or demands and coming out even stronger, the way we're going to go through this is not, sometimes we need to put our head down and just get the thing done. Sometimes, just like in business, we need to fold. We need to get out
Mm.
of what we're doing right now. That is the best, most resilient, strategic thing to do. And so, hence, approaching our resilience from that strategic perspective, meaning we know we use all the things we know from research on how to increase our resilience, and we pair this with good, realistic visibility on the context we're in, and then we design a plan that, therefore, will be more realistic and more successful as well.
It's a really good point. It's a very common business question as we're maybe partway down a major initiative, big program that's planned for
Hmm.
years, and it's way off track. And so at
Yeah.
some level, it sounds like that's the same sort of thing we should be applying to ourselves, is know when to stop and assess. What are maybe some pieces as we're looking at something in our own lives, you would say, this is how you know it's time to stop and shift gears? The right answer for resilience purposes is to actually discontinue that effort.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not a fast response, because if it was fast and simple, we would all be doing it already,
Exactly. Yes.
right? However, it's not extremely complex in requiring hours either. In a nutshell, and that's a bit of what I've done in my book, is distill this to how can we do this in a fairly sort of very focused way. You could have 15 minutes, 1 5, and do your thinking about, say, a very, any given situation. And what I'm saying there, and I'm using research to get there, of course, is first you're going to focus on your values. So what's most important for you in life? And you see the parallel again with in business when we're making decisions about, are we going to launch this new product or this new service? Part of the question we're going to ask ourselves is, how is this aligned with our brand, our values, where are we going, our positioning, right? So same here. Now review our own values as a person, as a professional, as a person as well. And then we're going to look at my sources of supply of energy, my sources of demands, and my overall context. And I've got, oh, actually, by the way, I have worksheets that are free, connected with the book, but very much standalone. We could have that in the show notes if you want, so
Yeah,
people can
absolutely.
just use them, because you can use them without the book or with the book. So they're very much standalone, but they allow each of us to review all these key components. And once you have this and you look at this, and then you have the decision you're trying to make. Am I staying in this or am I folding? It will give you the clarity you need. Because in the absence of this, of course, there are many pressures to actually keep doing the thing, right?
Yes.
Often there will be societal pressures in general to not give up, not stop, not, any of these things. And so then we're very much outside of, we're not grounded anymore into what am I? What am I doing? And where am I going? And these exercises ensure that we stay grounded in this, gives us the visibility we need, just like in business, to have just good perspective to then make that decision. And so usually that will help increase that clarity. Sometimes people will do this in addition to having conversations with people they trust around them. Sometimes it will be a mentor. It could even be a spiritual leader that helps you gain your own clarity, right? It depends. Or the executive coach you're perhaps working with. But these, you want to not just stay in your head and spin about it. You want to give yourself a bit of perspective, either through written reflection, like the one I was proposing with the worksheets, or in verbal conversations with others. But you need to nourish that conversation so that you can, overall, the goal is to increase your clarity, align it with where you're going, and then usually it will get a bit clearer.
I always feel like this is a good example of something high performers will sometimes not get right. And they're committed to a path. They're going to see it through. To your point, they'll just grind it, with grit and fortitude. Where do you see high performers maybe get this wrong? Is there something that's a pattern in your practice you've seen?
Often you've learned it,
Mm.
and it's not entirely problematic. Again, the fact that this is either how we were raised or context we were in, even sports we might have played or other competitive type activities. It is something we've learned, and it comes with many advantages. That's part of what allowed us to push even further to get to where we are. And it's amazing. It's great. We would probably not have gotten where we are had we not pushed that limit, a number of times. But the challenge is that at some point in life, the level of challenges, after you've done this a few times, they become fairly high level. And in addition, what often happens is on the personal life side of things, demands are adding up there as well, whether it's family members, friends around us, whatever, but other people and things happening in our lives that, even though this has nothing to do directly with the work we do, it's still a demand on us, the individual. It's still all in us in the one same person. Right. So, so if we keep just having this one approach of keep going no matter what, do all the things, never give up, at some point, the split between where your energy is coming from and the amount of demands you have is just impossible. There's no amount of exercise, meditation, eating well, sleeping, time in nature, all the things you could be doing that's going to be enough for this. The context is now asking way more. So that's where the disconnect happens. What we used to do doesn't work anymore. Now, it's not entirely bad news. It just means we need a different approach. We need to reevaluate, be realistic with the resources, and then go from there.
And that makes a lot of sense. When you're going right into the demands are stacking up, it takes more for recovery, and then these decisions are difficult to try to navigate. So I want to bring AI into that, since it's just turned everywhere right now. It's all anybody wants to talk about. And it's obviously very tied to the people and their resilience and these items that are relevant to us building this next stage in the business world. So right now, when you walk into a room of leaders or employees and AI comes up, what's kind of the temperature you get from them? And are they afraid? And what are they actually afraid of? Is there something under that that's not really about the AI?
Yes, yes. Well, I was in exactly that room just last week. I'm not kidding. Seriously. Fortune 100 top leaders of their technology department. So it was CIO and their top leaders from around the world. And so a team of, extremely in demand and receiving lots of demand people, most of them having about 2,000 people ultimately waiting for some of their decisions, that kind of thing, right? And what was on their mind, a couple of things. One was just the speed at which everything is happening that creates a level of demand that even though many of them had been leaders for years, they have never experienced anything like this. And in part of what their challenge is even though we know we need to redesign, organize things differently, rethink how we do things, restructure, we need to do that even more than what we're doing. It is not an adjustment. It's much more than this. So the speed of the change, they're realizing also the impact on their decision making. And research is backing this up, that whether we want it or not, and we don't want it, we don't want to make less optimal decisions or less ethical decisions, but we actually have research showing that as AI is managing more data, more analysis, and influencing, at times making decisions, as human, we tend to shift the responsibility of these decisions, even if we own them as a senior leader, a bit more to the system. And that's where the ethical drift lives. And we see it. We don't want it, but we see it in ourselves, in people in our teams, that kind of thing. So these were some of the challenges that were there. And so we started discussing in which ways we can start changing this and bringing things back more in our control in a way in this new context. And, and it really comes down to seeing our resilience as individuals and teams as not just this sort of nice to have optional wellness thing over here, but instead, in a complex system that this is actually leadership infrastructure. If we build that ability to go through demands and come out even stronger, both individually and in our teams, now we're able to maintain those good decisions, better judgment, no ethical drift happening, or much less. We're more aware of it and managing it better. So that was a lot of that discussion. I'm going to tell you, there were also burnout risks in the room. I could hear it,
Yeah.
and not just me, others as well. Some were bold enough to, stand up and say, "I'm exhausted,"
Yeah.
by what I'm seeing. So. So of course, my psychologist side hearing this, is like, well, I'm hoping you are talking to your executive coach if you have one. If not, find one, whether it's me or someone else. But we need someone to help you have a space to think on how you're going to do these things. Because when we're at our normal self, sure, it's a bit more tired at times, maybe, but in our range, we can actually find ways to implement this. But you get to a point where when we're exhausted, it's actually hard to think. And that's when we really need to have our person. But that's what was in the room there.
That's a really good point. Because many times when we talk about AI and some of that drift you're mentioning, we think about governance and guardrails, and we think that that's the be all end all of, oh, we put the governance in, we have the guardrails. And no, it's not true. To your point, even following the guidelines, you end up with this drift. And as we're tired and worn out, we end up relying on it more, maybe even feeding into the drift.
Yes.
So obviously all this is AI is changing context for all of our jobs every week, every day. We hear new messages and there's new tools deployed. As people are like, some of this fear is something I see a lot of. I'm also hearing you say, a lack of making the room for resilience, making the room for thought. How do you coach with them to work on that, make that time, and make sure that they're not acting irrationally or becoming too reliant, to your point, on the AI filling the gap? What are your thoughts on how to help people make that shift?
Right. Again, that's the $1 million question. How do we do this? The short answer, Mark, is it depends on each person's context. I will give you examples of context so that you can see, okay, what do we
Yeah.
mean by this? But the reality is that there isn't just a one answer and, oh, let's all do this and we'll all be fine, because each of our contexts is different. But often what I'm hearing from senior leaders, entrepreneurs as well, is there is so many demands, and you need to keep meeting the demands. I'm not going to recommend we all take 2 hours off every day to take care of ourselves. It would be great if we had that luxury. We don't. Okay. So, but given that, that we don't, but there are all these demands and we're human. So there's maximum capacity. And at some point you get into chronic cognitive overload. So it will impact, decision quality. It creates decision fatigue and all this. Bottom line is we need to protect it. We need to find ways to protect it. So how does that look like? Depends on each individual. Often it will be a combination of little actions on many items as opposed to one big action. Would be simpler, would be great if we could do that, but not how life is, apparently.
Yeah.
So sometimes it will be a combination of, okay, where can we find additional ways to create boundaries for you to
Mm.
protect smaller moments? So no, we're not going to get the 2 hours. Okay. But can we go back to some things we've heard before. We may have done them sometimes, but right now it's really important. Like we booked a meeting for an hour. It is your meeting. Say at the beginning that we're for sure doing this in 45 minutes. You're calling the end at 40 minutes in, and this is a solid hard stop at 45. We now just gave 15 minutes to everyone. And then you don't use your 15 to just do emails. You carve out first a 5-minute meditation,
Mhm.
which in the spinning ways that most days are going for any Fortune 100 and the rest of us as well, your brain's going to keep spinning while you're trying to do your meditation. And that's where many give up and they say, wow, that's not for me because I'm not calming down. No, no, no. It's like eating broccoli. It's good for you. You may not feel it immediately, but yeah, still good for you. Same thing. You just do it. It happens under the water. You don't feel it, but it's good for your brain. So that's an example, the boundary piece. Creating micro breaks, micro moments of recovery. So that meditation can be one. It could be a moment where for 1 minute, you're looking outside the window, not while listening to a podcast, not while you're on the phone. The brain needs to settle down for a moment. So these are examples, creating boundaries, creating moments where the brain can recover.
That makes a lot of sense. I think you bring up we always talk about coffee breaks or people talk about, water cooler talk. And some level, maybe a lot of that's been as we're remote or we're more hurried or there's less of those times that we just stop for a moment and
This
making me back to it. Yeah.
And I love that you're bringing in this example. I just gave some, and you're adding this one. The human interaction is also another important way. If you are in person, whether it's often or from time to time, optimizing these moments so that we have human interactions. If you're the leader of a group and sometimes we get together, make sure that not only we get together for meetings and the things we have to talk about, but also for a brief social moment. Otherwise, people will retreat in their own conversations with Chat and Claude and whoever else are having their AI conversations with, and we will miss something here that we actually know from research. We feel it as human. At some point, you need to talk to an actual human, but we actually know this from research. If all we're doing with our interactions is AI, at some point, we will be very much feeling isolated and needing these interactions in a workplace. That means let's create those. It's always been important, but it's even more important now. And in our own lives, if we realize that we're often on our own, doing our own thing and interacting mostly with AI, well, let's make sure we optimize other social interactions. You're going grocery shopping, go to the individual, the human cashier, and have a small conversation. We know this from research. Conversations, even with strangers, even on very light, superficial topics, are actually good for us in contributing to decreasing that sense of isolation.
It's amazing how that can be such an impact. I know I spent all my life living in big cities. I recently moved to a much smaller area. And I noticed that when I first got here, I would intentionally not want to talk with the cashier. And I've slowly over the last 3 years relaxed. And I actually enjoy that conversation now because not just about getting in, getting my groceries, getting out. It's about that human touch point that can make a big impact. So
That's
along
right.
these lines, everything's moving so fast. And AI, in the end, moves faster than society, and we can adapt.
Yeah.
And as humans, at some level, um, from a psychological standpoint, for a person, a team, or a culture, when the pace of the change is exceeding our ability to integrate, what are some of the impacts, or what are some of the risks we're creating?
Yes, yes. Similar to what we were talking about earlier, it gets to so with that acceleration, on one hand, it's helpful, more data, more analysis, da, da, da. On the other hand, more demands on us. And these demands on us at some point create that sense of there's just it contrary to before where you could get to a point where you know everything about something and a high demand moment or phase will have an end to it. Now, we cannot possibly know everything about anything. And some people will say no one knows anything about anything right now. So we have to let this go. And it sometimes is a way of thinking that we've had for decades for some of us. So we need to shift to really shift this because the impact otherwise is that chronic overload, chronic
Yeah.
cognitive overload. And when we're chronically cognitively overloaded, the system is jammed. It's like when you have too many tabs open on the computer and it starts not wanting to do what you need it to do. Same for our brain, and then one of the risks is, like we said, decision making goes down, quality of judgment, and even ethical drift. What that means is if we let ourselves just go with all this, it impacts our brand. Our brand, as not only it's creating not optimal outcomes and all this, it's also impacting our brands. We've spent years, decades, for some of us, building the quality of the work we do, the innovations, the thoughtfulness, whatever it is that is part of how we do best what we do best. And so then that decreases satisfaction, engagement. People then retreat, isolate even more. None of this is useful. And so we'll want to really keep a proactive eye on how things are going, have even more conversations, possibly create committees that are talking about how are we as humans dealing with the pace of change that are happening. And maybe we're meeting once a week, once a month, once a quarter, wherever we're at given current speed. It will depend from one team or one company to another. But we want to get ahead of this, not just be moved by the wave, but we want to co-create these changes.
And that's one of the things I wanted to explore. You've done a good job of talking about as a leader, what are some things I can do for myself, like those micro breaks and the meditation and take the extra 15 minutes. And now you talked a little bit about how do I extend that to my team? And it sounds
Yeah.
like some of that is to encourage these group conversations. What are some other like ways would you say, like as a leader, how do I, because in the end, the podcast is about people are the point. We're trying to make sure the people are a piece of the future and we're bringing our teams along for success. Because ultimately, an organization doesn't change with tech, it changes with people. And so if we're going to drive that change with our people, I think I'm hearing you have a few thoughts on how leaders can extend this to their teams.
Very much so, and thank you for pointing to that direction. Because we are a community. We need to support each other. Yes, there is a role, particularly of a leader towards their team, and all of us within the team will influence each other and our leader. So yes, we need to do this for each other, but specifically as a leader. So first, I'll say whatever the leader does for themselves individually, sharing this with the team, right? We know how, want it or not, even if we're trying to see ourselves as part of the team and all this, it doesn't change that as a leader, people look at your actions and use this as a guide to some degree. So instead of just doing the things to take care of yourself and just saying, yes, had a great weekend, maybe you say, I did these things because we're in such a high demand moment that I wanted to proactively build my resilience. Now you've given that lens. You've encouraged others to perhaps do this. So that's one piece. But also for our teams and ourselves, all these changes are also impacting our identity, right? Our identity is in part personal life, but it's also professional life. Our work is an opportunity to connect with others, to have a sense of satisfaction, meaning, contribution. That's part of identity. So if as AI comes in and other technology come in and either bring us closer to our ideal work self, so what we want to do, what we enjoy doing most, then that's great. But if it's taking away things that we loved, then we need to find other ways to get back there. So even that, and actually this part of the conversation on identity is also something that resonated quite a bit last week with my group of senior leaders, realizing I was putting words on their experience and what they were hearing from their team. It was like, okay, we need to bring this. And yes, we do, because it's there. So, and the more we help put words on people's experience, our own and that of others, it helps us process this, make sense of it, and to some degree, take more of an active role within it. Yeah.
Mm.
So that's another example of something we can do with our team, either the team as a group or in our one-on-ones, opening this conversation about how, with all these changes, it's shifting our work identity. How do you feel about this? How do you feel as it relates to your ideal work self, like what you prefer to do? Do you feel like it's helping, making you enjoy it even more? Or it worries you because it's taking away things that you used to love? And then let's talk about how we can get you back there. Yeah,
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And it all comes back to knowing who you are and who you want to be and maintaining that, protecting it to some extent, right?
that's right.
Where
And
you
it
want to
is
be.
something that I explore also in my TEDx, actually, on AI resilience. So that's something I talk about there as well.
It's great. And along those lines, we'll want to make sure we've got a number of items in the show notes around how people can find you, keep track of the great new things through TEDx. These pieces will get all in the show notes. But this was a great conversation. Really appreciate your time today, MH. Is there any like other main note or like a sentence you'd want people to take away as we go through these turbulent times?
Right? Yes, I would say stay curious. If we stay curious, we're going to be looking for opportunities to connect more, have more conversations, redesign things that will help us as individuals, us as teams as well. And even as we invite others to stay curious, that means all of our brains will be primed in some ways to keep an eye for ways we can do things even better. And in this context of such rapid change, this mindset will help us go through it in a way that's more engaging, will bring satisfaction and meaning to this overall phase that we're in.
And I think that meaning so easily gets lost with all the distractions and the short attention span we apply. And so that's very helpful. Thank you for that, MH.
Oh, you're welcome.
We appreciate the time today.
It was a pleasure, Mark.